And Pat Crowley and I are joined by Matthew Biberman, the author of a brand new book called Big Sid's Vincati, and a great story about a son, a father, and a motorcycle. And that vehicle brought them together. We're switching gears a little bit from the kitchen to the living room here to talk about your story, your and your father's story. 2 worlds apart. Pat and I were talking about this. You were both in a whole different circles of life, and you were brought together by a promise and a motorcycle.
Yeah, that's right. I made a promise to my dad when I visited him in the hospital after his heart attack, and I realized that he needed a reason to keep living, and I just grabbed some photographs to just chat about, and one of them happened to be of this unusual crossbreed, a Ducati with a Vincent motor in it, and I said, if you walk out of here, we'll build one. Mm-hmm. And 5 years later, we did.
That's really cool. Now, your father grew up racing and building motorcycles, is that right?
Yeah, he was the son of a butcher in Norfolk, Virginia, and ended up spending a lot of his life working under his dad in the butcher shop, but he was always drawn to motorcycles and to racing and tuning them. And eventually, after Dad died, he was able to open up a motorcycle shop and pursue that dream.
It's so ironic because your father always aspired to go to college and was told he couldn't go to college and was never afforded that opportunity. So his strengths were his mechanical abilities. Whereas you, even though you were brought up in the home of a mechanic, you loved the scholastic life, and that was where you hung your hat and your talents. And so your 2 worlds inversely opposed. You're in one end of the spectrum and he the other, and yet he always wanted to do the very thing that you had done. And,
right.
And in the end, you are able to do the very thing that he spent his whole life doing, and on a motorcycle. I think it's so ironic that the way it all happened.
Yeah, it so much of the logic of how it happened didn't make any sense to me until after it all played itself out. Why he kept bugging me when we would be out in the garage, asking me what it was like what college was like, until I realized much later how important a dream it was for him to go to college to that dream, and that this was his way of asking me, if I went to college, do you think I would have hacked it? Mm. So to ultimately tell your dad when he's in his 70s, bittersweet experience.
Yeah, because this book's more about building a motorcycle. It's about father-son relationship as well.
Yeah, yeah. It took me a long time to realize that street, the 2 bikes that we had was his British Vincent and his Italian Ducati. Huh. And the Ducati he had bought for $60, so I could wreck that, ride that one, and that was fine with him because he always wanted to ride the Shadow. And then in the end, only at the end did I realize that I was taking the heart of the father and putting it in the body of the son. Obvious from the beginning, but it wasn't until I actually was rolling the bike around for the first time that it struck me that that's what we had done. Mm.
Now you've taught, you teach creative writing at
first non-academic book. I wrote an academic book about Shakespeare, which is where my research interests are. Not so I had to write that book. But in many ways, my dream was always to write a book like this, although I didn't think it was going to be a book about building a motorcycle novel, you know.
And it just might turn out to be that great American novel because the subject matter is so poignant. You know, the relationship between a son and a father, there's just difficult beginnings. And really it was the, like every good woman does, the push that a great wife, your Martha, and the permission of your beautiful daughter, Lucy,
right.
And, you know, saying, Dad, it's okay. Away from the academic, get some oil under your nails.
Right, right. That's very true and well put. You know, what I would say is that the response has been very surprising in how positive it's been. Mm-hmm. You know, like it was nice to get an endorsement from Jay Leno, but Jay has known my dad. So that was nice, and he knows that I can write well. Mm. But to get an endorsement from Mark Knopfler, who I grew up listening to Dire Straits, and just if you've written what classic means, I mean, you get to use it in a way that other people don't necessarily get to do it, and to get from a total stranger that I wrote a classic.
Yeah. Significance of a Vincati. Had this hybrid ever been created before?
There were 6 built in Australia, and so it was a picture of one of those that happened. And it's kind of sort of odd that it all happened in Australia, but Vincent's chief engineer was Australian, and after he was, and in the circle around him, some guys looked at the Ducati chassis and realized that a Vincent motor would fit up in it, and Vincent went out of business in 1955. Is that if they had continued into the 70s, that is what they would have built.
Wow.
Which is why it looks so good.
Yeah.
And on the writing process, Matthew, have you taught some of your better students over the years, or some of your students who are very interested in writing, about how cathartic it can be, and maybe you learned some of that? I know I write every day for the newspaper and websites. I do political and business news, but it's when I sit down and write about growing up that I can really about my father. And he fought in World War II, and we owned a bar, and he was a lawyer, and he wasn't around a lot when we were growing up. And I don't resent him for that at all, just that I'm able to get some of that out on paper. Did you find that out as well?
Yeah, I'm a much better teacher on teaching that kind of stuff now that I'm more comfortable, because I've proven to myself I can do it. You know, so I'm able to be much more encouraging to my students, and to go and mine deep, and not to be afraid of exploring how those memories can explode into those emotional payoffs.
How did Big Sid mind being the leading man of your book? Yeah, Big
Right,
Sid.
right. Well, he's an old ham, so in many ways he's flattered. And you know, he looked over all of it as I worked on it, how it came out, because you know, you can only do so much on the page. But what I told him is there'll be opportunities for you to talk to people and give them the, and in many ways that's just a jumping off point for a conversation like we're having now.
Absolutely. Well, the book is entitled Big Sid's Vincati, and it's a great read, son to father, about a motorcycle of all things, you know, the very bridge that brought the two of you together. Congratulations on a great book. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Love that you're here today. Pat and I will be back right after these messages. You're watching us on Northern Kentucky Magazine on ICN 6.